Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Democrats. My name is Kevin Dawson, co-founder of Coffee with Democrats. It is my pleasure to introduce this morning Chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, Alicia Andrews, Henry Gray, and former Chief of the Osage, Jim Gray. Following these brief comments by Chair Andrews, Henry Gray, and Chief Gray, we will have a replay of a conversation that Chief Gray held with Native American influencers on Coffee with Democrats Roundtable held on October 3rd. We hope you will enjoy this conversation and thank you for supporting Coffee with Democrats.
And his son, who used to be involved in Young Dems, we have to get him back, Henry Rowan Horse Gray. Who braved crazy traffic to be here. So I wanted to, oh heck, is there somebody who can help me? On that ledge, there is a manila folder. Can someone meet me halfway and bring me that? I'm so sorry, I too thought there'd be a stage. Okay, so I need to start out before we do anything else and do a land use acknowledgement. We want to honor and acknowledge that we gather on traditional land of indigenous tribes and those who were forcibly removed, including Osage, Wichita, Caddo, Muskogee Creek, and Cherokee tribal nations, as the original inhabitants and keepers of the land and water that we now call Oklahoma. With this effort, we profess the truth that is often buried. Our presence here today is a result of broken treaties, genocide, and ethnocide by colonial powers against those who have maintained and cared for the land and water since time immemorial. We honor, with gratitude, the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit as well. So before I bring former Chief Gray up, I want to say he served as chief between 2002 and 2010. At the time he was elected to the position, he was the youngest chief in modern history. Chief Gray did a great deal for the Osage tribal members. When elected, 75% of Osage people were not considered members of the tribe. The chief fought this, and in 2004, President Bush signed into law the full recognition of Osage tribal sovereignty. Y'all can clap. Chief Gray today is a journalist, publisher, and consultant, including deep involvement with the film we're about to see tonight. So I'm going to invite the Chief and Henry up to give a brief perspective of how this film relates to the truth and just their perspective on it, because I'm sure they've seen it 100 times. So come on up, but let's welcome them.
I'll go first. Oe, Jajek, Ombre, Kawaku. It's good to see you all here to be a part of this experience and to begin to understand our story that is your story as well. This movie means a lot to me. It tells a story that is uncomfortable and difficult, not just for my family, but for all Wajaji, all Osage. When you watch this movie, please think about the phrase, "This is not America." I hear it after every tragedy. I think you should think about that phrase. We have a history and a legacy we have to confront, and this is the beginning right here. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Oklahoma Dems for inviting us here for this special event, this screening of this film. It was shot in Oklahoma, and it was shot on the Osage Reservation. One of the things that's most important to me that I'd like to convey to you tonight is that this really happened. I know Hollywood's notorious for exaggeration of events to sell tickets, to put you all in these seats. This is not one of those. But it is violent, and it is an extraordinary, hurtful part of Oklahoma history that is not taught in public school or in college. Much like the Tulsa Race Massacre, these events really did happen. It's unfortunate that in order for most of America to know about what happened in Tulsa in 1921, you had to watch HBO's The Watchmen. In the same line of that thinking, what you're going to watch tonight is not in your history books, but it's in our history book, our family history book, and it's in the Osage history book. And hopefully, maybe if you've had a chance to reflect after watching this movie, you'll ask yourself, why isn't this story in our history book? This is not a contemporary issue. This has been a problem from day one. We've always struggled with the historic injustices in our past. And I think we owe it to those people who are killed and murdered, and lives are forever altered, much like our relative, Henry Roan, who was murdered in this film. He's my great-grandfather, and he's Henry's great-great-grandfather. So when we tell you it's personal, now you know why. But for us, and what we hope will be an achievement, is that what Martin Scorsese put on his film came as a result of collaboration with the Osage people. It didn't change the history, it didn't whitewash it. In fact, it illuminated it because he listened. Because the FBI files and David Grand's best-selling book does not have the contents of the Osage character, culture, language, music, ceremonies, observances, or how we treat each other. All those things were incorporated in this film as a result of the collaboration that Scorsese and Apple made with the Osage people. In some respects, I'm proud of that. In other respects, I don't know if this is going to resonate with all of you. I know it's a hard movie to watch for us, Osages and other indigenous people, because the federal policies that made it possible for this to happen happened all over Indian country. And in Oklahoma specifically, the period of time, the first 20, 25 years after statehood, we saw the largest transfer of land from indigenous hands to non-indigenous hands. And one can only wonder, why is that not in our history books? It is a matter of federal American policy and state government that made this happen. And so I say this with a tinge of humility, that this movie means a lot to us. And I hope you appreciate the effort and the work and the beauty of this Osage country that's captured on this film is also balanced with the honest account of what happened to our people. And that even as tragic as those days were, come see us today. We're a completely different tribe. We're stronger. We have built institutions of our people's government that rival anything here in Oklahoma. And we're a partner. And we work hard. And we put a lot of people to work. And we're a good corporate citizen to the community. And despite what the governor may think, we know who our friends are. And a lot of them are in this room. So thank you very much. Oh, we're going to have...
Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increasing Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And with us today is a special guest host of Coffee with Democrats, former chief of the Osage Nation, Chief Jim Gray.
Good morning. We are here today on Coffee with Democrats. And a special guest today, guest host for Coffee with Democrats, is the former chief of the Osage Nation, Jim Gray. We also have Walter Lamar. Walter Lamar is a former FBI agent. He's been recognized highly within the FBI and within the law enforcement community with his work with both what took place down in Waco during the Branch Davidian siege, as well as the Oklahoma bombing. He's been highly decorated within the FBI and commended for that. We also are expecting guests with Michael Anderson. He is an attorney who specializes in Indian Nation law. He is going to be a great participant today. He did graduate from Columbia University, and he's highly respected within the Native American and First Americans legal side, and particularly the part about making sure that Indigenous policy and procedures is proper when as far as it goes to Hollywood, and making sure that Hollywood recognizes the processes there. Then we also have Holly Cook Macaro. She is a very highly respected person within both politics as well as within the Native American Nation. She is an advocate that is very helpful. So we're looking forward to having her come on this morning. She is also she's been an activist with the Democratic Party. So I hold that in high esteem as somebody that is very involved with politics. So we're looking forward to having her come on here as well. I will be muting myself, turning it over to Chief Gray now. And in the meantime, I'm going to be reaching out to Michael Anderson and to Holly to see if there are some issues with their Zoom to make sure that they can join us. So I'm going to back out. I'm going to mute myself altogether, and I'm just going to turn it over to Chief Jim Gray as our special host. And thank you so much for being our special host today.
Thank you, Kevin. Just so you know, I just texted Mike, and he's using the link you sent us this morning, and he's not getting in. So I told him to use the one that you sent us last week. So hopefully he'll be able to get on soon enough to participate. And Walt, it's just me and you, maybe for the whole hour. Who knows?
Hey,
well,
maybe that's all the better.
Yeah, right. We can talk about all the people that didn't make it to the panel. So I thought that would be good. No, actually, one of the things that really intrigued me about the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, obviously it's close personally to me, and it's my family that's in this issue, this story, and it's also my tribe that's in this story. And but I think it has a broader reach than that to all of Indian country, especially as it pertains to law enforcement issues, which features prominently in this film and the book as well. And as somebody who's worked in Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is part of this story as well, the beginnings of it, as well as the actual work that you've devoted your career to in law enforcement as a federal official, both at the FBI level as well as the Department of Interior and even the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and as a one-time director. I think that's how we met years ago. And so I thought maybe just as a general rule, can you talk about how important it is for Hollywood, who's engaged in multiple movie projects, both on the screen and in television and in streaming, where law enforcement issues have come up? I can think of Dark Winds, I can think of Yellowstone, Longmire, Wind River. There's numerous movies that have come out where law enforcement features prominently in the story. How important is it that we get this right? And just feel free to expand on whatever aspect that you feel is important.
And I'll say I just got a text from Holly. So Kevin, she is in the waiting room, so she's been waiting. But Chief Gray, number one, thank you for inviting me to participate this morning. And Kevin, I want to thank you for presenting this platform and forum for us to talk about some of these issues, because they are, I think they're not only issues that are important to us in the Native community, but across our communities in this country. It's as I was thinking about coming on today, I mean, for a long time, a very long time, Native American portrayals in television and in the movie industry, and I'll say, Chief Gray, I can include you in this, as baby boomers, we
just on the cusp, yeah.
Yeah, we recall as children the contradictory emotion of seeing us on screen, whether it was our little black and white television tubes or whether it was at the big screen at the movie theater. We were kind of proud that we were thought of, but we were horrified in the way we were thought of. Right? We were kind of proud to see ourselves, but we were at the same time horrified. And so now we fast forward to the past several years, and maybe a little bit beyond that even. We've seen this amazing surge, Native content on television and now streaming networks. And what I would say is, and thinking about this, is that our stories are safer when we're involved. When we're involved in the process, whether we be financiers, whether we be directors, producers, writers, actors, and then cultural and content consultants. So We'll touch on that law enforcement question in a second too. But with this amazing surge and the importance of us being, and I don't say us, I say the industry being right about what the content is. I mean, if a story revolves around heart implant surgery, they're absolutely going to have a consultant that's going to run them through and make sure that they're a consultant to talk about heart implants. But when you want to get it right. So if you're producing a movie that has or a TV series that includes Native content, absolutely, it's a bit more complicated than the one consultant scenario. And you think about our cultural diversity, our geographic, demographic diversity, the complexities of sovereignty, the government to government relationships, that roller coaster of federal policy. Then when you're asking about the criminal justice systems, I mean, it's laced with jurisdictional nuance. And when we are not part of that entire process, in days gone by, when we were portrayed, it's just as I said, it was in a horrifying ways oftentimes, and it gradually progressed at a point where when we're portrayed, they're missing it still by a mile, right? And now as we're moving into present day, they're missing it more like by feet, but they're still missing it. And they're still missing it because oftentimes their thought is well, if we've got a native consultant, then that person can cover the gamut of everything that we're going to be presenting, whether it be cultural, whether it be law enforcement, whether it have to do with our communities and our languages. They expect that now they've got that one native person there, they can check the box. It's absolutely not true. And when I've watched these television shows, and there are things that I'm gonna see that a lot of folks don't, because it's the law enforcement part. But we want authenticity and accuracy. We want this to be right, because this is our opportunity to make damn sure that our story is told correctly.
Right.
To do that, the industry has to recognize that you don't get on the phone and call up one native and have them show up and now you've checked the box and you've covered it.
Yeah.
It's much more than that. And when you brought up earlier about Killers of the Flower Moon, well, was it 2020 or 2021 when the announcement first came out that the movie was going to be made?
Right.
And somebody called me and asked me, well, what's my thought about it? Because of the, it's about the birth of the FBI. Well, I mean, immediately I said, well, the FBI genesis should only be an interesting factoid as part of this.
Right.
I mean, you're going to tell the story of the Oklahoma City bombing. You're going to tell the story of the tragedy. And then you're going to have as the side story, the investigation and talking about the investigation. Likewise here, my hope was that the FBI, the birth of the FBI would be an interesting factoid, but that the story would revolve around the Osage people, the tragedy, and to tell that story. And Mike Anderson, I see he's here now, but he and I have talked about it, and the fact that Osage leadership, including yourself, had an opportunity on the front end to meet with Martin Scorsese, that it changed the trajectory and it changed the story. Now, I haven't seen the movie, but talking to you and others that have, that basically is now what happened, that the FBI genesis is an interesting factoid, but the movie concentrates on the tragedy and the true story. And so I'll just add one more thing to this, though. But I feel like the movie is concentrated there, but the commentary surrounding the with in that it's our responsibility to address is the fact that this there with the Osage people was as tragic and as horrific as it could be. But the same story is across our communities, across Indian country, whether it be precious metals, whether it be timber, water, uranium, coal, natural gas, even grazing leases and farm
agriculture. Yeah, absolutely.
And in every case, the anything that we own or control, there's always been the risk of hucksters, opportunists, criminals, thieves, and the commentary that we have to promote is that it goes on yet today. The Killers of the Flower Moon is going to be an incredible platform for us to tell that part of the story as well. So,
look no further than the missing and murdered Indigenous women issue that is in today's newspapers today. So I would say that you're absolutely correct. These issues are still happening. Thank you, Mike. I wanted to ask Holly, one of the things that we did in our introduction was to talk about some of your work that you've done, both politically as well as your work in Indian country, in terms of getting the movie industry more prepared for taking on Indigenous content, because that seems to be the topic of interest at this point. We're seeing a surge in of content coming out in all platforms, movies, television, streaming services, and there's a real ripe opportunity for Indian country to engage in in a equal basis, in a way that maybe we haven't been in the past. And your work as chair of the Illuminative organization certainly has brought a lot of that to light in the last 5 years. And I thought maybe this might be a good time for you to pitch the work that you do there a little bit, and hopefully expand on where you see things moving in the post Killers of the Flower Moon era that we think is going to happen. That's going to, I think, explode even more interest in Indigenous content.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me this morning. And I think you've hit on what we're really seeing right now is a renaissance in Indian country, not just in the film industry, but in politics, right? All of us, I see, Walt Lamar, Michael Anderson, we've all worked in the political space for so long, and coming at it from different perspectives and roles. Michael and I were in the Clinton administration together, and I look back then and on how different things were. We used to get so excited when the president would include Native Americans when he listed off communities of color, and we expect so much more now, and rightfully so. This renaissance, I think, in terms of politics and visibility and all of that, I think, we are seeing in much more accurate portrayals in the film industry. And my work at Illuminative is as chair of the board, right? Crystal Echohawk is the founder and the real visionary behind the work at Illuminative, and along with a really tremendous team there. And that work and the identifying, I always say that Crystal saw a space that needed to be filled, right? And Illuminative provides, I think, both social media content, which is so important in driving a message, in pushing a narrative or calling something out. And she does it in a very nimble way. The team at Illuminative is very responsive, from things like Rick Santorum's inappropriate comments to things like, helping get over the finish line the changing of the name of the Washington professional football team. All of those things, they were team efforts, but the amplification of how to accurately portray Indian country, Native Americans, our stories, how to tell our stories in a way that is not the commercialization or just perpetuating what we've always known is as the Hollywood Indian or the Hollywood version of Indians. And that work over the last, I think we just crossed the 5-year mark at Illuminative. I think all of that in conjunction with so many people who've done this work for so long, right? We all stand on their shoulders. We are approaching a time, and as we see Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm actually in New York City today, and I saw this huge billboard, and it's Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and Lily Gladstone. And it brought tears to my eyes to think, it's so incredible to see.
It's moving, isn't it? Yeah.
It really, it's surprisingly emotional when you see that. It's such a big deal to us, and it marks a place, I think, in time and history. And I think we're on the brink of seeing, hopefully, another momentous time in history as we move towards award season. But all of that, it's this renaissance in Indian country. I think the electoral politics, the rise of the influence and power of Indian country, and the voice of Indian country politics and media, and in film, where it's a remarkable time.
Well, thank you. I wanted to say a few words about Yancey's inability to come on to this podcast. He called me last night, and he was terribly sorry that he wasn't going to be able to participate. And I know some of you who have followed his sudden rise to stardom with his participation in this film was even echoed even in the most recent final episode of Reservation Dogs, which I hope we have time to talk a little bit about as well. But here's where I think if Yancey was here, I wouldn't put him on the spot to ask him about his experience in the film, and certainly because of the ongoing strike with the actors, he has to, protect the solidarity of the group by not participating in any media, and I respect that and everything. I was happy to say, well, let's just talk about your record collection. I don't care. Just get on the call, But as it turned out, he had a project that he did want to talk about. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to say a few words about it. His dad, the late Charles Redcorn, was a historian, and throughout his entire life was a writer. He was he had an Ivy League education, and he came back home and worked and devoted his life to Indian country. And throughout his life, he sat down and talked to people, Osages, who had experienced the kind of tragedy that is documented in Killers of the Flower Moon. But in their cases, their stories were never investigated. What was happened to them, it speaks to the multiple number of unsolved cases that were uninvestigated during that period of time. And for the sake of those memories, he wrote a fictional novel in a way that told their stories without disclosing their names. But as I remember talking to him about it years ago when he wrote the book back in 2002, I said, why did you write it fiction? Everybody's doing a nonfiction version of this, and he says, I wanted to write it fiction so that I could tell the truth, if you get my meaning. The stories were completely taken from oral testimonies that he took down over the course of 30, 40 years of visiting with elders who had survived that period of time. And he captured it in a book called A Pipe for February. And it was so moving to be able to know that Yancey had auditioned and got the part to play Chief Bonnicastle in the movie and played the chief of the tribe. And during his engagement with the filmmakers, specifically Scorsese, they struck up a conversation about A Pipe for February. Scorsese wanted to see it, and he showed him the book, and he read it. And it wasn't too much longer after that, during the production, that he decided to add a scene to the film. And I'm going to break my tradition and just give you just a small spoiler. The opening scene in the book of A Pipe for February is the opening scene in Killers of the Flower Moon. And he acquired the rights to use that scene for the purpose of the film because the beginning of that scene was so moving. And even though it to the visitor just watching it in the film, watching it in the theater, who may not be Native American or Osage, they're going to see an opening scene that takes place 20, 25 years before the events of Killers of the Flower Moon. And my impression from that experience is to watch how the Osage elders at that particular period of time anticipated what changes were going to come. And they were trying to prepare their people, that next generation, that some of these old ways were going to have to evolve into embracing a new world. And we were going to have to walk in two worlds, and we were going to have to accept certain things. And that's the dynamic of A Pipe for February, is that push and pull of what do you hang on to? What do you adapt? What do you resist? What do you embrace? Who do you love? Who do you trust? All these things are wrapped up in this book. And I'm so excited about the fact that that part of that book is in this movie. And it just means a lot to me as an Osage and as somebody who grew to know and love and respect a dear elder who unfortunately won't be able to see this. And I know that if Yancey was here, he would be expressing these kind of sentiments as well, that this is such an important piece of book. And just recently, they did a second printing at the University of Oklahoma Press, where Martin Scorsese wrote the foreword to the reprint of the book, and David Grand wrote a back flap blurb promoting the book as well and encouraging people to read it. So that's my shameless plug for A Pipe for February. And now I want to go to Mike and say, after what we heard from Walt and what we've heard from Holly, there's a practical aspect that I think people have raised this question before, and you've actually dug into this area. Aside from your legendary career in Indian law world, you've branched out into doing some entertainment law and allowing tribes who may have an interest in this to help bankroll and finance. And what are the challenges that you see for tribes that are engaged in maybe in order to really command that story, sometimes it's better to have an interest in that project. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, great question. You know, I've always interested in film, both the Renaissance in the 70s when you had Little Big Man and Outlaw Josie Wells and Soldier Blue, some of my favorite Native American films. But in 2016, I was part of a featured in a documentary called Promised Land, which was about the struggle of the Duwamish tribe in Seattle to obtain federal recognition. And in talking to the producers and directors, I thought, wow, you know, this is great that an independent film company can do a topic in film on a very specialized topic, like the Duwamish recognition. And since then, I've just seen a number of documentaries that are very specialized. They're in a niche market. But I've also seen in the broader context with Killers of the Flower Moon, much more commercially, marketable, larger films. And then films and TV shows like Dark Winds and Reservation Dogs. I mean, there has been a renaissance. And so as my clients look to expand, diversify from primarily gaming establishments and that kind of field and those endeavors, we started looking at Native American film. It doesn't have the margins, obviously, as a large casino would have, but there is profit to be made both in the smaller market and larger. And so that's how I became involved in it. The BIA used to guarantee films through their guaranteed loan program. They're not really doing it as much now, but they sponsored and bankrolled Wind River and LBJ and some other films. And so that's how my clients got involved in thinking that maybe they could diversify their economies, get into film, but also because they really want to shape and form the content. They want Native American role models, and I'll just make my own shameless plug. Both Walt and Holly and I are on the Native American Hall of Fame board.
Yeah.
We have an induction ceremony in a couple of weeks in Oklahoma City at the First American Museum. And one of our inductees is Will Sampson, who is a Muskogee Creek like I am. In the very early films, like when you didn't see a lot of Indian faces, but in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he was also in The Outlaw Josie Wells and in Poltergeist and some other films. But so I had an historical kind of interest just from having a tribal member in film. But and now seeing that our clients want to actually do investment in films and expand into entertainment.
If just so we tie up this loose end here, Mike, if somebody wanted to participate, invest, sponsor, anything like that, where can they go and what can they do?
Well, the film producers are always looking for investments. And so if you read the trades, Variety and others, you'll see a film is in production. I actually met with the production company for Killers of the Flower Moon at an early point, and before they'd actually really engaged with the Osage tribe. And I was talking to them both about investment, also, but things like using traditional tribal regalia in the film, actual Osage language, and things that I later learned that they parroted back to the tribe when they met with them. So that was terrific.
They heard you.
Yeah, but and many other people, and I know the tribe eventually had a consultant directly working with as a liaison to the film production company. But it's basically following the trades and see what's in production. Films always need money, even the large films, whether it's a monster like Killers of the Flower Moon or very small productions. And so it's one of the challenges for the filmmaker is to really, sometimes they're great on the artistic side, but they're not great on the business side. So you need a marketing plan, you need a sales agent, you need a foreign distribution if that's the kind of film that's marketable there. But it's basically doing business in just artistic content, which is a challenge for many people.
I think one of the things that make Killers of the Flower Moon so interesting, and I don't know if you all recall, but the day the movie premiered at Cannes Film Festival in France back in May, I had already seen the movie, and I was as one of the descendants of the people who are killed in this film. The Apple thought it would be a good idea to invite the descendants of those that are featured in the film to be able to see it privately before it is shown worldwide. And so I had a chance to go to New York and watch it, a private screening. And so, but before I left, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So you guys know what that's like, I got to see it, but I couldn't tell nobody about it. And I have to say, it was probably the longest 2.5 weeks of my life, sitting here at my home, and not even able to talk to friends or family about what I got to see. And but it was moving, and it was incredibly moving, and it was powerful in its message. And so these ideas have been rattling around in my head the whole time. And so the day the film premiered, I got an email from the lawyers with Apple and saying I've been lifted from my non-disclosure agreement, and I can talk about it at any time after 2:30 this afternoon Central Time. So I had to wait, and so when 2:30 hit, I started typing away, and I made a series of tweets. And I thought about writing a review, like your conventional critic review, that everyone else would do, And I thought, no, there's tons of people who can write that, What can I write that maybe no one else would? And based on what I experienced watching the evolution from the book coming out to the movie rights being bought, to the outreach efforts, and to the response by the tribe as an evolutionary process of collaboration that eventually led to an active participation between the tribe and Scorsese and the film company in making this film. And then after all that, getting in a chance to see it was so powerful. It doesn't answer every question people are going to have. Is it the story the Osages would have written? Probably not. But for the purposes of this film being made in such a collaborative manner, it blew my mind looking at the amount of artistic creativity and genuine desire to get this story right by everybody who worked on the sets, to the people who worked in costume, to Robert De Niro's commitment to be able to speak Osage and do it in a convincing way was my biggest takeaways from that film. And so I wrote about all that in those tweets and saved very little to just talk about. I thought it was a great movie, and I've never seen it like that because it didn't elevate the white savior narrative as the FBI coming in on the white horse saving the day. They solved one or two cases out of literally hundreds of unsolved mysterious deaths that maybe weren't so mysterious after all, but certainly unsolved, uninvestigated. And so the viewer is left understanding that the resilience of the Osage people was really the thing that got us through that period of time. And specifically Molly, the character Molly, played by Lily Gladstone, so bravely and passionately controlling her energy and emotions, staying in the realm of that character, but knowing that she's Osage and she's surrounded by all these forces, some sharing her own bed. And it is just an incredible movie. I couldn't say enough things about how they interpreted that story and put it on the screen the way they did. That tweet, last time I checked, it was like 7.4 million views around the world. And I didn't think people would care that much about process, but I want to throw the question to all of you. How important is process when it comes to getting that part right and not knowing until you see the final product whether or not that process produced a result that you could be proud of? Walt, you go first.
Well, Chief, number one, I think you must have talked to Scorsese about lighting tricks because you're doing a really good job with that lighting. maybe you can get me.
I'm a big fan of cloudy skies because it's good for camera work.
Okay, so Scorsese gave you a one up on the rest of us with your lighting. And then I'd also like to just mention quickly, Mike brought up Will Sampson, and Will Sampson was very much a proponent of hiring Native actors to play Native roles, and I think that's part of our excitement about inducting him into the National Native American Hall of Fame is that he wasn't the only one, but he was on the front end of that movement to to ensure that to make it more correct. I'd also like to just say too to the listeners, when I mentioned earlier about the complexities and the nuances, it's incredibly important to recognize there's 574 federally recognized tribes. There are state recognized tribes. There are 200 different languages spoken, and oftentimes people talk about the native culture. There is really no such thing as the native culture, because we're made up of a lot of cultures. And I mentioned the diversity that we're all across the country, and hopefully the biggest takeaway from today's visit is that folks it'll pique their curiosity. They'll do a little more exploration and figure out who we are. That they'll grab a book and they'll pick it up and read a little bit more about who we are. And Oscar Hoke just came out with a book called Calling for a Blanket Dance. And for those folks in Oklahoma, it is tremendously insightful, because it takes you right to the Kiowa people, right to the Cherokee people, right to the essence and the heart of being multi-tribal, growing up multi-tribal, growing up in Oklahoma. And it's a wonderful way to gather that kind of insight. But please do take that time to think about who we truly are, and what when we're talking about the movies and the industry, what we're talking about is that it's not just a singular story.
Thank you. Holly?
I'm so glad that you brought the question about process up, because we've seen the work. Bird Running Water was at Sundance for 20 years. He recently left. Adam Perone is doing a terrific job there now. And the programs that they put together in terms of the labs and the fellowships to get natives on the other side of the camera as well, right? Which is so important. We have Jane Myers, who was just nominated for Emmys, who was on that side of the camera as the producer of Prey, and continues to have a number of projects out there. That process and having those voices and those eyes from the ground up are so important in making sure that this Renaissance time that I referred to only gets better. And so that process is getting people and teams, and not just as consultants, but as writers, which we see, Sierra Teller Ornelas, who was the first woman Native American showrunner on Rutherford Falls. We see, as you referenced, what just ended was a terrific 3 seasons for all of Indian country, and a lot of people in America, and watching Reservation Dogs, that all of that, both sides of the camera are so important.
Absolutely. That is a perfect example. If you want to look at the situation, like, how do we get it right? I mean, what is the optimum standard that we should be shooting for as an industry? I would say, in the movies, if you're going to have, because not every movie is going to have a Martin Scorsese directed, and it's not going to have these A-list actors like DiCaprio and De Niro and Gladstone come in and carry the weight of the film based on their star status. You may have smaller projects that may involve other tribes, but if nothing, you can learn that there's a process here of getting that part right. Even if you're not a Scorsese, you can follow Scorsese's process and producing a film that actually is respectful of the tribe you're telling the story about, or the indigenous people you're telling the story about. Mike, I got to throw you a Reservation Dogs question, brother, because this one hits real close to home. And I just wondered if you could speak to how you feel like the Muskogee Creek people have embraced this story, how they've engaged in it in terms of feeling a sense of pride. That scene in the jail where Lily Gladstone plays Hodke, and she's talking to Willie Jack about drawing upon the strength of her ancestors to get her through the troubling times that she was going through. It was such a powerful, moving moment in the entire series. It's left an indelible mark on my psyche, because it spoke to me. I literally wept watching that scene. Can you talk a little bit about it, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, the community has completely embraced that film. I think half my relatives have been in it. You know, there were one of my aunts was in one of the singing scenes. But yeah, I think they captured the community life from death, healing, kinship, and all the themes that they really kind of rememorialized in the last episode. And the community has completely embraced it. The scenes. What I was concerned about is, would this resonate, globally or nationally with other reservations, and it has, because I think the stories are so familiar. I wasn't sure the Indian humor would translate, but it translated very well.
Yeah.
What I'm proud about too is that they had a Native American writers' room. Some of the guys from the 1491s, like Ryan Redcorn and Dallas Goldtooth, are in there, and I think that makes a difference. The authenticity when you try to. I think about the dark old days 30 years ago when Pocahontas came out, and you clearly did not have a native imprint on that. The difference between the Res Dogs, and I think after Killers of the Flower Moon, I think there's going to be a continued evolution marketplace for native films. Holly mentioned the Sundance Institute. I know she's involved with them, and that's a great place when you talk about process. It's great to have written content and actors, but in the end, it comes down to financing and producing films. And the fact that there are now more executive producers, associate producers, and others for film, showrunners, that is going to make a huge difference. You'll see that both in very small films and large films, in the next year or two as these films come into production.
I think one of the things I really admired about the way Sterling Harjo handled this entire 3-year run was that, you see it in other communities. You see it in our own community sometimes, where somebody achieves a certain level of fame, they pull the ladder up, and he didn't do that. He did not do that. He took the opportunity that he had, and he brought other people with him. He gave them opportunities to shine, and he asked certain people that he had worked with in the past to come in and step in and direct an episode, or to help write an episode, like you said, Mike. And so that there were multiple fingers all over this project that had different visions, different creative juices that were going into it, that made the story so fresh. Each one was so uniquely different from the other, even though there was a narrative to the whole story, especially this last season, because they were tying things up. But I just want to give a shout out to Sterling, because that was a choice he made. And it was such a smart choice, because like you said, Mike, we don't want this to be a one-off. We want this to be the beginning of a new renaissance of Indigenous filmmaking, both in front of the camera, behind the camera, and the content. Because what we discovered through both telling an accurate portrayal, reflecting a historical event that happened in our past, like Killers of the Flower Moon, or telling a contemporary story about the lives of Indigenous people living today, with all the challenges and struggles that contemporary society has placed upon them, and the unrealistic expectations that mainstream media has put on us. Yet we still find a way to have our own voice and have our own space to be able to tell this story from our point of view. I think it's just gonna, it gives me reason to hope that these are not the exceptions as they have been perceived today, but they're gonna be the rule going forward, I think. Holly, if you don't mind, I want to dig a little deeper in terms of a little bit about how important it is that we organize a pipeline of content for the industry, because you don't want them to just pick a consultant. You don't want them to just, do it as if it's a PR move. You want the original work to get the best attention from the industry that has the resources to make it real. And but the burden is on us too, right? We have to produce. We have to write scripts. We have to go into acting classes. We have, there's a TikTok video of a woman that's just going off on how come there's not an Osage playing the lead actress. Well, if we had an Osage that had, worked her way up like through the ranks like Lily did, maybe that argument would make sense. But Lily demonstrated the ability to channel her own indigenous upbringing into this character. But it just speaks to the need for us to be able to do our part. Can you talk a little bit about the work that Illuminative does to help create that?
Yes. Creating that pipeline, I think, puts and you said, we have that same responsibility to show up in spaces where we want to be represented and with those same kind of talents. And I think of it a little bit in terms of politics, right? Back in the day, I think, Michael, you remember there just weren't a lot of, for instance, Native Americans doing either, advocacy work. The entire lobbying industry was made up of non-natives that were representing tribes, but we hadn't had enough people in the pipeline, right, to serve in administrations, to get that sort of Hill experience and do all of that. And now I think, we have such a strong lobbying corps made up of Native Americans that represent tribes, and not necessarily, I'm Ojibwe, but represent a number of tribes that are not Ojibwe, just, the same as Michael. And that is the same thing in the film industry, right? We have to get people in the pipeline. So it's what Sundance does with the fellowship. Illuminative has had a fellowship program with Netflix and others to help get the resources and support. We certainly have the talent, right? And we as Indian people, we are storytellers at our core. And I always say, if we weren't able to laugh, we'd be crying at our own very situation in history. But which is, I think, why we have such a well-developed sense of humor in Indian country as well. So there's no lack of talent. What we do need is provide the opportunities for people to develop that talent. And, when you're an artist, you need those sort of resources to do the work, right? And that is something that takes time. And I think we are seeing some of that. And as we see the Sierra Teller analysis, the Janish meetings, the writers, the opportunities that Sterling gave to Tazva Chavez, all of these folks who are so talented. And I see them leaving the ladder down behind them as well. And that, I think, is what them using their platform and opportunity, but I also, finding that space. And I know, Michael, you do some of this work in finding that space where that talent can be grown and mentored. Mentorship in Indian country and this space, I think, is going to be really important.
Say, Walt, I don't, I'm not asking you to give us the full width and breadth of what you've been able to experience being married to the director of the National Museum of the American Indian. But could you give us at least a glimpse at the kind of things the museum does as a way of educating the general public about Indigenous life, Indigenous world that we have all grown up in, how important it is for that to be accurately reflected? I know one of the things that Kevin did when he was in that position was that he opposed the Indian mascot issue in Washington, D.C. He opposed these, he championed projects such as the accurate portrayal of Native Americans, whether it's in Madison Avenue or whether it's in Burbank or Hollywood, because those things affect federal policy in D.C. The perceptions that the public has that is born from, Land O'Lakes butter or the Washington football team logo or some of the perpetual misrepresentations like you talked about of our lives on the screen has an effect on federal policy. The museum stands alone across the street from the U.S. Capitol as a point of education to the world of who we are and what we are, and definitely what we're not. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, thanks, Chief Graham. I appreciate that question, and I'm incredibly proud of my wife. We just got back from. We just got back from Boston, and where she was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And we were we were sitting there and we're preparing to go to, I'm sorry for being so damn emotional, but
It's all right.
we were preparing to go to the induction ceremony. And she said, I'm not exactly sure how to act. And it dawned on us both at that moment that over the past number of years, there have been natives that have been inducted into the academy, Louise Erdich, Kevin Gover, Suzanne Harjo, Philip Deloria, Mark Trahant, and others. But yet, in terms of the thousands of people that have been inducted into that august community, there have been very few natives. So there is no pathway to say this is how we act, this is how we accept it. And to see her go across the stage, and followed right behind her was Glenn Close, and John Lithgow was there, and I mean it was. Wow. And the incredible minds that were inducted into the ceremony, and then to have this Native woman being recognized in that way, it's incredibly important. And the main thing that she knows and recognizes is that it isn't about her, but it's about us. Mm-hmm. And just exactly what you said about making sure that the ladder is dropped down behind you. Just this weekend, she was profiled in the Washingtonian magazine as one of the powerful women of Washington D.C., wow. Included with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and others, and that's basically what her quote was to say that I'm gratified to be the first Native woman to lead a Smithsonian museum, and she said, I'm heartened to know that I won't be the last. And so, but the thing that the museum and what they're trying to do, and it's really important, because when the museum in 2004 was opened, Rick West took a different approach to it, and he took an approach to it to say we are going to present our story from our perspective, from our words, and in our mm-hmm. words. Well, it got poor reviews. It was like people didn't want to see that. They want to see the Disneyland Indians. They want to see the romanticized Indians. They want to see what they saw on television growing up. That they didn't want to see the story that we wanted to tell. Well, the museum was ahead of its time then, and then now that is the right story, the proper story. So her vision is, number one is there's a 1 million piece collection of our belongings. It's not artifacts and not things. It's our Native belongings that are out at Suitland, Maryland, mm-hmm. and at the Cultural Resources Center. She wants to see that collection connected to the communities. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I have a personal connection, because I found my great-grandmother's cradle board that's there in the collection.
Holy smokes.
That wow. carried my grandmother. It carried my grandmother. So when you find those things, and we all have those things there. Now, I will encourage folks to go to NMAI online, and you can search your name, you can search your tribe, you can search for, and you can find things in the collection that are of your family. So that's one of the things she wants to do. She wants to create partnerships outside the museum with Illuminative and Indian Collective and ARP and other organizations that will be able to take the word out. They also have NK360, Native Knowledge 360, and that too is a movement to be able to educate. So it's, Jim, you're absolutely right. It's about education, creating awareness. And then at the same time, though, you have to create that environment there where people, the tourists that are come flocking to DC, that they can go somewhere and see something that kind of entertains them a bit. But I think
and it educates them.
Educates them. Yeah. Well, you're educating them sometimes, not exactly forcing it down their throat, but when they walk out, they know more than when they went in. Exactly. But what I will say about Killers of the Flower Moon when it comes out, and I think we're all going to be in Indian country very, very proud of Lily Gladstone. And I will say that She's my cousin-in-law, so I claim some connection and pride right there. She's going to be a breakout star among huge stars. She's going to be a breakout star. And Jane Myers, when she told me that she was at one point told me that she was going to produce a movie about Comanches fighting the predator in Canada, I said, "Oh yeah, sure, that'll
Okay.
yeah." And then there it was, and then it was, and Holly can talk about probably about what it did on streaming, and that met all expectations. The
My only regret is that it was never in the theaters. I really
Oh,
wished it was in the
yeah.
theaters, because I would have gone multiple times. A movie that that visually was beautifully done on my computer screen was such a disservice to all the hard work that went into telling that story.
So lastly, what I want to say is, and one more thing about my wife. She's also in the Forbes magazine 50 over 50 too, on that list as well. So she's kind of on a roll, and she's embracing her platform, that this is the place to talk about not me, but who we are and what the museum does. And don't forget about the fact that there is an NMAI in New York City as well.
That's right.
Park. So she's responsible for 3 big institutions. But when Killers of the Flower Moon comes out, and there's going to be such a buzz, and there already is with Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls and all these other shows that are native content, we have to be kind of protective.
Yeah.
We, in our community, we're going to have to be protective because, as I said earlier, the hucksters, the opportunists, the thieves, they will be coming. And what's Mike Anderson? What's the line in the movie? The wolves.
Oh, can you see the wolves in this picture?
So they will be coming, and they'll be trying to imitate who we are. They're going to be trying to imitate our portrayals in the movie industry. So we've got to be very protective, and not to be on a sour note, but
No. I agree with you, because my interpretation of that is that we have to take control of our own story, and we have to make sure that we're the ones telling it, not somebody else. And then,
Jim, if I could just make one point on that, just on our telling our own stories. I mean, I think as we're wrapping here, there are a lot of untold stories, a lot of historical narratives for my tribe. There's really never been a great film about the Trail of Tears. There's been a lot of individual small, tribal productions, but on a mainstream. There's now been a recent great sports story, like the Hominy Osage beating the New York Giants.
Yeah.
And, I saw a panel with Wes Studi, and he was talking about there hasn't been a great romantic comedy mainstream with Native Americans. He said, where is the Guess Who's Coming to Dinner for Native Americans? And I thought, hey, here's a title, Guess Who's Coming to Wild Onion Dinner? And we can have that. But I'd love to see a romantic comedy. And some of the investors I've talked to have asked for that. So I'm hopeful at some point we'll see one of those.
That's encouraging. Just to kind of give an ode to a little bit some of the more current dynamics that's happening here in Oklahoma, and unfortunately happening in other red states across the country, is that there's been laws that have been passed at the state level that is preventing the any kind of history being taught in the public schools that may make somebody feel uncomfortable. And unfortunately, history is not there to make us feel good. Unfortunately, it's there to help educate us, so that if there were mistakes in the past, like slavery and Jim Crow and Reign of Terror and the removals like the Trail of Tears, that they be brought to the attention of this generation in the school books. And right now, we're fighting a battle right now in Oklahoma. House Bill 1775 is on the books, and it has had a chilling effect in the school system from being able to even bring Killers of the Flower Moon into a social studies class. There's a story that a teacher in Dewey, Oklahoma, has bought 25 copies of the books for the purposes of educating their students on it. And when that law was passed, she put them in a box and put it in a shelf, because the consequences of violating this law would be she would lose her teacher's license, and there would be an accreditation to her school system. And none of those things were worth the risk of jeopardizing her career or her school. That would even further damage the school system's ability to teach kids. And if you all have a comment on that, that's fine. If not, I'm happy to wrap it up, but I just wanted to put that in there because this is a dynamic that's going on. The lieutenant governor attended the Cannes Film Festival to promote the fact that Oklahoma give tax credits for this film to be made in Oklahoma. And I just want you to know that I'm glad that the lieutenant governor was there. I really am glad, because he was promoting this film for an international audience to see. And when he came back to Oklahoma, a reporter from OSU TV, it's a NPR station based at Stillwater in OSU, Tulsa, KOSU, I think is what it's called, asked him, how is it possible you are promoting this film to be shown worldwide for everyone to see, while at the same time you're preventing the content of that story to be taught in public schools? You know, these are legitimate questions that are being discussed right now here in Oklahoma and in other red states where these laws are on the books. Any comments or questions, observations? Looks like I stubbed the panel with that.
Well,
no.
In the chat, there's a question, and it was asking us how we feel about Killers of the Flower Moon. There was a post-premiere press conference, and apparently Lily Gladstone said that the Osage grieved William Hale's incarceration and later death. And so the question is that revelation surprising?
Well, part of William Hale's success in being able to establish himself in the Osage community is he learned to speak the Osage language. He became friends with Osages. He attended Osage gatherings and ceremonies. There's this great photo of one of our Ilonshka dances. It was kind of a panoramic view picture at the time in the 1920s. That is, part of it has deliberately been removed from the museum at the Osage Museum because he's in that picture. And it's difficult to describe that people who pretended to be our friend ended up not being our friend. And even with the trials and the convictions and eventually his parole in the late 1940s, there were still Osages that had some affection for him, but the vast majority of Osages did not, of course. But we still lived in that time that even though there was those set of crimes that got all the attention, what also happened was that there was a silence that took place for the next 40 years where nobody even talked about it. And when it was talked about, it was only talked about from the perspective of J. Edgar Hoover, who did a PR movie called The FBI Story, where it was a white savior narrative. And it further alienated the Osages from their own story and from their own relationships to their own family members whose crimes were never investigated. So there's always been this uneasy coexistence that exists in Indian country, that between the Indians and the non-Indians that live in our communities. Anywhere there was allotment, there were guardians. Anywhere there were guardians, there was graft. It wasn't just an Osage story. It was a Five Civilized Tribes story. It was a story anywhere where the Dawes Act was implemented. And these folks were responsible for the largest transfer of land, according to Angie Debo's book, And Still the Waters Run, of the massive transfer of land out of Indian hands into non-Indian hands. And this is just one personality out of that entire history. And obviously, there's no way you could have pulled that off if he came in with horns and a tail. He was nice. He was gracious. He was gregarious. He was charming. I don't know how else to answer. I don't know.
Chief Gray, I'll just say that I think all of us know that person or persons from our communities, and where in Anadarko there was a person who basically was a loan shark and loaning money 100 on 100, and was in collusion with the Bureau of Indian Affairs when they would have a check coming for oil royalties or whatever it might be, and then he'd collect 100 on 100. If they didn't pay up, he would, that there
get their land
consequences. So,
yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's how we were taken advantage of, because we have a certain loyalty when we take somebody as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And even sometimes when they mistreat us and abuse us, we don't easily just cast them aside. So I can see where that could have been a possibility, where people were saddened by that, and your explanation is great. There's also a question in the chat, and maybe you see it, Chief Gray, is asking about when you talked about walking in both lands or having two lives.
Mm-hmm.
How do you expound on that phrase?
Well, I when I give a lot of talks, and I know we all do from time to time, people try to understand, well, why is it important that we carry these traditions with our people today? We live in 2023. Well, we owe it to those ancestors who really gave up just about everything in order for this generation to thrive. And whether it's as a result of the success in gaming that has given us the financial resources to reinvest in culture and language preservation, to acquire our homelands back, to invest that money into healthcare for our people. It's important to understand that those sacrifices and the dedicated servants of our people that represent our ancestors are largely responsible for the success that we're enjoying today. And we owe it to them. And even though we do live in a modern society with modern conveniences, I still believe that you can think and live and exist and succeed in this world, but you can do it with the heart of your indigenous people the whole time. And it makes you a better person. It makes you whole. And I think in a way, it gives you a sense of perspective that your goal in this life is to hopefully leave that woodpile a little higher than what you found it for that next generation. Those kids are growing up so that they will have the benefits that you had. Well, I want to wrap up in the sense of, does anybody have anything they would like to plug? If they do, this would be a wonderful opportunity. I'll start with you, Holly. Ladies first.
Anything I would like to plug?
Yeah. Any project you're working on you'd like to share with the audience? Anything of that nature?
Yes, I have been working very hard on the effort to free Leonard Peltier and advance his clemency petition and gain the attention of President Biden in either granting clemency or the support for his petition for compassionate release. I think we've reached a tipping point in terms of the number of members of the prosecution who have stepped forward. And I compare it to this, the Secret Service agent a couple of weeks ago who was profiled in the Washington Post. He rode on the car that President Kennedy was in when he was shot. He's 92 years old. He wanted to tell his story, and he spoke out for the first time, some of which differed from the Warren Commission rendering of that day. But I compare it because I think folks who are a part of these moments in history and they have this crisis of conscience and want to step forward, and everyone from the judge in Leonard's case to the U.S. attorney who handled the prosecution and appeal to the FBI agent in charge of the Minneapolis area office at the time have stepped forward and recognized that they couldn't prove that Leonard committed a crime on the Jumping Bull Ranch that day, have acknowledged the racism that was present and in the atmosphere that was funded and created by the U.S. government in Pine Ridge at that time, and the fact that 27 multinational corporations had filed for the mineral rights on Pine Ridge and in the Dakotas at that time. The background to this story is one that should be told, needs to be told, and a man has served nearly 49 years in prison. And right now, I always say I'm not relitigating this case. It's about justice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was such an important cause that's on top of mind with a lot of people in the Indian community. And please give your husband our congratulations for receiving his, what was it, a Lifetime Achievement Award of some type?
Yes.
What did he get?
The Lifetime Achievement Award by NAFOA, which is taking place right now. So I will.
Good deal. Mike, what are you working on?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the National Native American Hall of Fame. Our gala, annual gala is Saturday. We have 6 inductees. Mark Trahan from Indian Country Today. Lameda Warjack was an AIM activist back in the day. Joe Dela Cruz, very well-known Quinault Tribal Chair. Richard Trudell, a lawyer that really initiated a lot of law careers. And Will Sampson from my tribe. So that is online. They have information if you want to go online, but that's the next project I'm working on.
Excellent. Whoa, anything happen? Whoa.
Yeah, sorry, I just picked up a cold and I'm now have a coughing fit going on. But I will say this: Holly is an absolute strong advocate for anything and everything that she does. And if I ever get in a bind, I want her behind me to get me out of whatever bind that is. And I think Mike Anderson will be at some point leading the effort for a big movie production. And when he does, I'm looking for a role. So make sure that you include me in that big movie production. But I'll just say I'm very proud to be included with the three of you in this podcast, and I think it's the absolute most important thing is always and never underestimate the power of our voices.
Absolutely. I couldn't think of a better way to end that. You guys, you have been great and great sports, and next time we all get together at whatever an event that brings us all together, I'm going to make sure Yancey buys us at least a round of coffee in honor of the Coffee for Democrats for honoring us with this hosting responsibilities and having this particular subject on their platform to discuss. And I thank you all very much. And Kevin, if you can unmute, I'll turn it back over to you to finish this out.
Well, it's such an honor and a privilege to have everybody here with us on Coffee with Democrats. Really, this is one of the premier shows of the year. And I really want to thank everybody for taking your time to come on and be with Chief Gray today and talk about this. I wanted my whole goal was to not be seen during this entire broadcast. The only thing we're going to do is talk just a little bit about how we're going to rebroadcast this. We're going to rebroadcast it tonight at 8 p.m. We're going to rebroadcast it again on Thursday morning on the 5th at 10 a.m. and then Thursday evening at 8 p.m. and then we'll have it again Sunday at 8 p.m. Our next guest on Coffee with Democrats, we're reaching out to Representative Arturo Alonso Sandoval from the Oklahoma 50th District, I think it is, from Oklahoma City. We're going to ask for him to come out. This is Latino month. Help me out here. I'm throwing a blank here. It's Latino Recognition Month, I think it is. And so we're wanting to make sure that he is able to come back on and talk with us and have an opportunity to talk about his activism within the Latino community. He's a great guy, just a fantastic guy. He graduated from OU. So all of you with OU Heritage, University of Oklahoma Heritage, raise your hand. We're going to be well represented. He is an OU graduate with an architecture degree. So we're looking forward to having him come back on the 12th and talk to us. So it's Latino Heritage Month. I'm sorry. I drew a blank there. And again, don't mean any disrespect to anybody. I just, I'm a dumb old man. So thank you, everybody, for being on here. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for being gracious. Jim, you're a great host, and everybody for being.
It was my first time, so I didn't know what was going to happen.
So
you're a natural at it. And excellent job.
Yes, we are thrilled, and we're going to. And if we can do this again sometime, if there's if we get closer to the 20th of October and we decide, hey, we got to do something else in recognition of K2FM or or when Yancey is released, then from his I don't know what his bondage. Yeah, maybe we can do something else with him. But what a great show! I mean, this is fantastic.
This has been another thrilling episode of Coffee with Democrats featuring our special guest host, Chief Jim Gray. We hope that you have enjoyed today's program, and we appreciate your continued support. We invite you to join us next time as we continue to open progressive conversations from all of our friends across the great state of Oklahoma and beyond.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And I greatly appreciate everything.
Thank you. See you guys.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye. See you, Kevin.